China and Russia are friends, right? Yeah, think again. That friendship only goes so far. Welcome to China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. It's easy to believe that the axis for World War III is already taking shape, with China and Russia at the helm. It's especially easy to believe when Russian President Vladimir Putin and Chinese leader Xi Jinping do things like release joint statements announcing a no-limits friendship, as they did in February of 2022. Is that what No Limit Records was all about? It wasn't the fame or money, but the no-limits friends we made along the way. But the truth is not so simple. Sure, China talks about supporting Russia. For example, last month, China's defense minister told his Russian counterpart in a video call that his country fully supports Russia in its war on Ukraine. It's kind of like when your friends tell you they fully support you getting a mullet. They know it's a terrible idea, but they keep that to themselves because that's what no-limit friendship's all about. According to Newsweek, China's newly appointed defense chief and Shoigu discussed boosting military cooperation and coordination as the Russia-Ukraine war drags on. Which wouldn't be difficult since the Chinese Communist Party has so far mostly supported Russia economically rather than militarily. Russia released a recording of the video call. In it, Defense Minister Dong told Shoigu that in recent years, the US and Western world have been isolating Russia, and we strongly support justice. Ah, yes, of course, China has always supported justice, except, in Tibet, Hong Kong, Taiwan, Xinjiang, and the South China Sea. China supports justice the way anteaters support ants. So the CCP says it fully supports Russia, but notably, the readout of the meeting released by the Chinese Defense Ministry said nothing about support for Russia against Ukraine. And when a journalist asked about it, Foreign Ministry spokesperson Wang Wenbing said that the CCP hopes all parties will strive to cool down the tensions over Ukraine and create favorable conditions for the political settlement of the crisis. Yeah, that totally sounds like a regime that fully supports Russia. Turns out your friend doesn't support that mullet after all. Which is a fitting analogy since mullets in Russia as a terrifying military power both ended in 1991, no matter how hard some people try to bring them back. Meanwhile, China isn't exactly abandoning its relationship with Ukraine. China did recently demand that the Ukrainian government immediately remove over a dozen Chinese companies from a list of firms that Ukraine has designated as international sponsors of war. Reuters reported last month that China's ambassador to Ukraine, Fan Qianrong, warned the Ukrainian government that the designations of these companies would hurt bilateral ties, which means that there are still bilateral ties to hurt. Looks like China is still trying to be friendly with Ukraine despite their no-limit BFFs being at war with them. This is like instead of taking your friend's side in a fight, you say, I understand why you don't like them, but they've always been cool with me. And by cool, I mean I want that money. And the CCP is not being very clear about the consequences if Ukraine doesn't do what it wants. While one source stated that China hadn't threatened Ukraine over the matter, a second source said that Beijing could link the listing to Chinese purchases of Ukrainian grain. Now there's some food for thought. It kind of seems like China is talking out both sides of its mouth when it comes to Russia and Ukraine. It would seem the no-limits partnership between Russia and China actually has some limits. So Xi and Putin aren't BFFs so much as they are BFFSLAIDAOBLs. Best friends forever, so long as it doesn't affect our bottom line. And there are other ways that the CCP isn't exactly being a very good friend to Russia. I'll tell you about them after the break. Welcome back. China and Russia have declared a no-limits partnership, but don't be fooled. They're still rivals on the world stage. So it's not surprising that Russia is now admitting that it's having problems with Chinese payments that would help it circumvent Western sanctions. When questioned about the problem by Vedomosti, a Russian business newspaper, the Kremlin spokesperson said the government was working on addressing the problem with the Chinese government. I'm not sure what that entails exactly. Pleading? Promises? New Putin thirst traps? I'm shocked he hasn't opened an OnlyFans and made it mandatory to join. It's a big problem. According to the Russian news outlet Izvestia, 3 out of China's big 4 state banks have halted payments from sanctioned Russian financial institutions. Some are saying that China's biggest banks are finally getting scared that they're going to get caught in the West's sanctions against Russia. That's why you can never rely on a BFF SLAIDAOBL. Reports out of Ukraine also show that Chojo Commercial Bank halted its transaction with Russia's ally, Belarus, which has also been sanctioned by the West for human rights abuses and supporting Russia's war in Ukraine. And if you think that's a sign of frosty relations between the dragon and the bear, wait till you hear about what's happening in the Arctic. Russia has long had designs on gas and oil supplies underneath the melting polar ice caps, and as an Arctic country, has sought to dominate the region for decades with icebreaker ships like this one. China's helped Russia to achieve this, clearly out of the goodness of their heart and not because they want to steal, share those resources. No, that's not something communists would ever do. Last August, the two countries conducted a joint naval drill off of Alaska's Bering Sea coast, and they are increasing their maritime law enforcement and naval cooperation. This represents a sea change in Russia's previous attempts to exclude other countries from the Arctic. But with Sweden joining NATO, Russia could soon be the only non-NATO Arctic country, leaving it no choice but to rely on China for help in maintaining and advancing its plans to dominate the area. Oh, don't you love it when someone that's emotionally distant finally opens up and admits they need help? That's so heartwarming. Well, as heartwarming as anything can be in Russia. There's just one problem. China is heading north without Russia, too. Recently, a report said that between January 2022 and June 2023, 234 Chinese-owned companies have registered to operate in Russian-controlled Arctic territories, an 87% increase when comparing it to the two previous years. As of June 2023, 359 Chinese-owned companies operated there. I haven't seen such a large migration to the Arctic since the spring when bowhead whales return once the ice is thawed so they can feed on plankton. What? Sometimes you get jokes, sometimes you get marine fun facts. Deal with it. The United States and Canada, along with other Western countries, are especially concerned, especially since Beijing has declared itself a near-Arctic state and is advancing a fleet of ice-breaking vessels. After all, China has had designs on northern Canada's mineral deposits, so much so that the CCP has in recent years tried tightening its control over rare earth minerals in Canada. The result? Ottawa rejected a December 2020 takeover of an Arctic gold mine that could have given a Chinese state-controlled company a foothold in the Northwest Passage. China has a real Simba, everything the light touches is your kingdom mentality. If they see it, they think it's theirs. I'm surprised they haven't gone after that website that lets you pay to name your own star. You can't do that, all the stars are ours. Look, they're even on our flag. Canada and the United States are both working on reshaping global mineral supply chains to reduce dependence on China. So naturally, any Russian-Chinese cooperation in the Arctic looks incredibly dangerous. But on the other hand, with Russia increasingly isolated and bogged down in Ukraine, it might lose out to Beijing on the issue of the Arctic. Russia is becoming so reliant on China for its economic survival that it is losing any real say on the matter. China's gone from their sugar mama to their sugar master, which sounds like a supervillain facing off against a diabetic hero. The Eurasia Daily Monitor of the Jamestown Foundation released a report that Russia is at risk of losing its dominance over the Arctic sea route to China and Turkey, mainly because China and Turkey have surpassed Russia in icebreaker ship construction. Indeed, according to the report, these two countries are now building icebreakers at record rates as the Kremlin has tried to delay or even cancel its plans for new Russian icebreakers due to budgetary shortfalls. Russia is losing a lot of money. I haven't seen something lose this much green since the corkwing wrasse, which loses the bluish-green tint in its scales at the end of its breeding season. You just got fish fun fact. Even before the harsh sanctions imposed over its invasion of Ukraine, Russia's economy struggled from corruption, previous rounds of sanctions imposed over other matters, mismanagement, the coronavirus pandemic, and a steep demographic decline. Hence the abandoned plans to build icebreaker ships. Man, don't you hate it when you save up for years to buy yourself a boat, then right when you're about to get it, all the horrible decisions you and your best friend made come back to haunt you? Super relatable, Russia. At the same time, China has become heavily involved in building 5 Russian Arctic ports, while increasing Chinese rail lines into the region. Some in Russia are alarmed at China's expansion into their country, especially considering the various border disputes between the two countries over the centuries. But Russia doesn't have much choice. Putin's money problems are forcing him to turn away from the north, and he relies on China for mitigating sanctions, so there isn't much that bear can do to escape the claws of the dragon. That sweet, sweet sugar master dragon. The CCP is perfectly placed to make heavy demands on the Kremlin for its economic concessions, in exchange for leaving some of the territorial and economic rights to Moscow. Large sections of Siberia are underpopulated, yet have increasing population of Chinese farmers and so-called tourists, although there is some disagreement about what exactly that means. One thing is certain, though. Russia has deployed large numbers of Siberians to fight and increasingly die in Ukraine, and many thousands more have fled the country to avoid conscription. Which is shocking. How could they not be loyal to Putin? I mean, sure, he's a ruthless dictator who gleefully murders anyone who stands in his way, but have you seen his thirst traps? More like Mosque, wow! This could all give the CCP even more leverage over the Kremlin. Local governing councils in Siberia that are geographically close to China, have a large Chinese population, or benefit from economic dealings with Beijing, might play Beijing and Moscow off each other for favors which could undermine ties between the two countries. Alternatively, they might just decide to outright obey the CCP, especially since Putin is disproportionately sending Siberians to die in his faraway war and is increasingly seen as weak and too distant to stop China. That could lead to a level of regional tensions and fragility in Russia not seen since the Russian Civil War a century ago, and would all play into the hands of the CCP, which has long wanted to be the senior partner in its relationship with Russia. So, Russia won't be part of the Axis in World War III so much as they'll be a lapdog, hoping to get scraps from China. I talk about a lot of controversial things on this show, and YouTube hates it. We're constantly being suppressed. That's why I've created a new show to talk about controversial topics by hiding it in gaming content. I call it Deep Thoughts While Gaming. And the latest is about how to defeat your inner demons according to Monster Hunter. Check it out and let me know what you think. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.